Thanks for watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Show with myself, Michael Wright. I am absolutely delighted to have Natasha Chalk on with us today. Natasha, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This is going to be a great show, why relationships matter more than systems. We were just talking off air about this very topic, and to be honest with you, we probably could have push the start stream right then because we're getting some lovely debates in terms of this one. It's something that Natasha and I are really passionate about. So we're going to be talking today about what we define as in terms of relationships and systems within schools. We'll be discussing that point from a student's perspective and why it really is important to develop relationships rather than rely on the system, or at least heavily put the emphasis on there. But we'll also be discussing a lot of things to do with the the teacher's perspective as well. So we'll try and cover as many factors as we possibly can for this point. As always with the shows, we invite you for comments, discussions. So if there's anything that really resonates with you, please do drop us a message wherever you're watching this as well. If you're watching or listening to this via Podbean, please do comment on our social media posts when we put those out. So it should be a really good show. Okay, before we begin, as always, I want to give a shout out to our wonderful sponsors of this show. First of all, it's AQA. And as you know, they're a prominent sponsor for Teachers Talk Radio, and they do a lot of great things in the teachers community. With AQA, they're looking for people to really kind of get into what they do in regards to the resources that they produce. And they offer building CPD, strengthening understanding of the mark schemes, and gaining fresh insights into enhancing the teaching. Also, they're looking for examiners as well. So if you are interested, it's flexible, it's paid work that fits around commitments with full-on training from experts and ongoing support from experienced team leaders. Whether you're an early careers teacher or have years of classroom experience, examining AQA is a valuable way to develop your knowledge and join a community of specialist subjects. So do join AQA as an examiner this summer, and if you are interested, please visit aqa.org.uk/apply. We also have another shout out from our sponsors, Hatchet Learning. It is brought to you in partnership with Hatchet Learning. They are publishers of professional development. I can't even talk today, Natasha. I thought I put my dentures in, but unfortunately I can't. I'll start that again. Hatchet Learning, they're publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Do level up your professional development today and visit www.hatchetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles. Okay, so Natasha, I wanted to begin by asking you, because you put this to Teachers Talk Radio's attention, and you put it forward as an idea for discussion. Why this particular topic? What is it that means to you to talk about relationships and systems?
I think education is built on systems. The whole thing. We have policies, we have timetables, we have attendance frameworks, we have behavior systems, and they are all really important. But for young people, and especially the young people that I work with, those with SEND and those with behavioural challenges, those that have come out of the justice systems, who have much more systems and policies in place, or trauma backgrounds, those that now, because we're seeing huge amounts of children with EBSA, emotional based school avoidance, systems aren't enough. for them. We talk about relationships, being the gateway to engagement, and it's true. Before learning can take place, the young people need to feel safe, they need to feel understood, they need to feel valued. And when relationships are strong, systems work. But when relationships are weak, even with the best systems in the world, we're going to struggle to succeed with those children. And I think relationships are not a soft topic or a soft skill in education. I think that is the foundation of everything we do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's as we were talking off air, we work in a people-facing profession. We work with people, and we work within the system, and the system really should be there to provide the foundation for us to do what we do. But to rely upon the system or to rely upon policies when you're dealing with people, your problems, very human problems, for me, it goes against the grain of what it is to be altruistic or to be helpful. Because if you're going to be referring to the policies of the systems, like you mentioned, we're working with people who need to develop trust, and the worst thing we think we can do for young people is to essentially tell them, well, actually, I'm not going to be engaging with you as a person. I'm just going to go and follow this policy here, which is one of the worst things I think one can do for young people. How about for teachers then? So how does that how does this how do you reckon this topic today will kind of benefit teachers who also might be feeling that the same as us in terms of that relationship is more important than systems?
Yeah, I think systems create structure, and we all like a bit of structure, but relationships create motivation, and I think that is the same for staff as it is for students. That's personally how I feel. I think if you are in a place where you are only working with structure and systems, then there is no relationship. You don't feel part of something. Then I think that's exactly the same for students as it is for staff. Staff want to buy into something too, but they want to feel motivated. They want to feel engaged. They want to be part of something. And I think it's very difficult to work somewhere where you don't have that feeling.
Yeah. It's I guess it's to do with feeling psychologically safe. Am I right in thinking that? Yeah. So if you work in a school where you are heard, may not necessarily obviously get what you want all the time, but at least you're listened to, you're heard, you're able to be treated as a professional, but have the respect of, doing your job in that way. I think if people have that, I love that point you made about, you were talking about, sorry, that I have ADHD. So when you're talking, it's like, and then the next thing you know, when I say something, it goes. Motivation. Thank you. Motivation, ambition. I love the fact that you mentioned that when you work in the school that really do look out for you and they recognize you, it actually enhances motivation, which I thought is a great thing to explain. So some key points in terms of why relationships matter more than systems. We were discussing prior to the show, we're discussing things such as systems, organized schools, relationships, humanize them. So if we can go back to maybe the system, so how would in a school setting, from your experience, what do schools and education establishments need to do in terms of providing a good enough system for people to work in?
I think actually with the changes that are coming through with the white paper and the SEN reform, and we know there's others sort of coming, I think it highlights, the part of that I enjoy is that finally we've realized that the education system doesn't work for everybody, or doesn't work, and then change needs to be made. And I think that is part of it. Bringing that inclusion in is a huge part of it. A perfectly designed curriculum won't reach a child who doesn't feel safe enough to engage with it, and a behavior policy is not going to support a child who feels misunderstood, and an attendance policy is not going to make a child that's got anxiety come into school. Those that have experienced those difficulties need some sort of relationship. The relationship is the difference between complete disengagement and re-engagement. And I think when a child trusts an adult, they will often attempt things that they're unable to do otherwise. You know, if you listen to any of people's podcasts where they talk back, or you watch any of these videos where they talk about, you know, their teacher, there will be one teacher that everybody will remember at school. And it, you know, it's because that one teacher made a difference to them in the system. It's that one member of staff that you're never ever going to forget, because, you know, they're the ones that believed in you, they're the ones that encouraged you to do maths, or they're the ones that said you could do it in English or PE or whatever it might be. And I think that's what brings the difference between schools where you go in where they've got, you know, beautifully perfect systems, but there's issues surrounding it because children aren't engaged or children aren't coming in. And then you have other schools where things are slightly more lenient, maybe slightly different, but you've got such relationships that you can see that 30 children in that class are listening to every word that that member of staff is saying. And I think that's us as teachers being able to step outside of those systems just slightly to build those relationships.
That's, you know, you're completely spot on with when people reflect on their best, the teachers they remember. They don't necessarily remember, oh, I remember that teacher for being really super organized and for doing this. Yes, we need to be, absolutely.
And we all are.
Yeah, we all are. And I'm not discounting any teacher who's like, that's their thing. But the students will remember the teachers that, I guess if I'm translating it, they'll remember the teachers that spent time with them building that relationship. They spent time with them. They didn't have to. They could have said, oh, do you know what? Just I'm on my lunch break. So no, they spent the time working with them, encouraging them, having those conversations in the corridor before they go to the next lesson, you know, or parents' evenings, after school activities, enrichment, you name it. If teachers spend that time building that relationship with the students, then the students will always remember that because they will value that relationship over that. I think
it's the teachers that made them feel understood rather than judged. If you judge someone on their behavior or, you know, what they're doing or their ability to get a level 5, then that's one type of teacher. I think the teachers that don't judge but try to understand those situations is another type of teacher.
What type of teacher would that they be then? If you're, I'm guessing that the other type of teacher would be different from what exactly?
I think if you take the time to understand a child, and to be able to work with them, you're more likely to build a relationship with them. And I know it's frustrating. It can be awful, you know, if you've got a class of 30 and you have that one child in there, and we've all done it. We've all had it. I mean, I came from mainstream. I've been in special. I've been in AP. You know, you just want to, here's your lesson plan. You want to get through it. You want them to learn what they need to learn. And I totally understand that. But sometimes taking a minute just to understand that child, to say, okay, this is what they're doing, but why? Why are they doing this? You know, what is it that we're not providing right now that they need that's going to stop this behavior or help this behavior? Those are the teachers that make a difference. And they are, like you said, they're the ones that, you know, say good morning as you walk through the door, notice when your mood has changed because, you know, you're not normally like that, or, you know, you're just totally different today. You're quiet today. You look a bit tired today. You know, have you had your breakfast? What did you have for lunch? Have you had lunch? Have you even eaten today? Have you had any water? Those kind of teachers are the teachers that we're talking about.
So if we're talking about the, you know, the skill of connecting with people and being empathetic and intellectually and emotionally curious when it comes to understanding the students we work with, how come, in your opinion, how come do you think perhaps the overall temperature, if you will, of education, why is it shifting or has shifted towards more systematic and more policy-based approach? Why is it not still going, well, actually the core of good teaching, it comes down to building the relationships?
I think it's had to. I think we are based in schools on our grades, on our outcomes, on how well we tick boxes for when Ofsted come in, because that's how we're judged. We're not judged on the relationships we build with children. We're not judged that, that child sitting at the back of class had his hair over his face and suddenly took it away and looked at us one day because he suddenly feels safe and comfortable in the classroom to do that. No one's checking in on that. What we're judged on is the grades that those children get, all the way from SATs in year 6 through to GCSEs, A-levels, university degrees. And so it's difficult for, we have to prioritize as teachers. There is a huge workload on teachers as it is, and we know that. And we're expected to be everything, we're expected to be teachers and parents and social workers and safeguarding officers. And so there is a huge amount of workload, and I would never take that away from us. And I know that sometimes when I say things, people say, if I had the time, and I say, no, I totally understand that. If you had the time, the world would be a different place. But that's what we're judged on. We're not judged on the pastoral side or the caring side of what we do. That is what we have to bring to the table.
Yeah. It's almost like I look at the data sets that obviously leaders work with, termly, yearly, quantitative and qualitative. And it's, from my background, when I'm doing my research with the data I'm presented, it's so much easier to present quantitative data and to look at that data and analyze the data because the figures are there on the screen. And obviously teaching has, over the last 15, 20 years have gone to that, where we look at, various ALPS, CAT scores, et cetera, and you're looking at students' attainment in terms of the data. Yeah. And I don't think the education system hasn't quite cracked that qualitative approach, where the qualitative data actually is just as important and really underpins and underlines a lot of the quantitative data. And I get it, it's incredibly hard to measure the qualitative data, because, as you said it before, first of all, is the emphasis is on the specific data set. But I mean, how does one test? How does one really look at that data and go, well, that is actually having an impact? It's having an impact from an anecdotal perspective. So we can go in and say that child who had the hair over the eyes, all of a sudden one lesson they brushed the hair from their eyes and they became engaged. That's amazing. And it makes me upset to hear that. Why isn't that used as data? Why isn't that used as a valid piece of data to say, yes, they've done this, they're opening up now, they're feeling more safer in this environment? That should in turn help out with the scores. But I just find that I just don't think they've found a way of doing that yet. And it's with all the leaders I've worked with, the ones that I've worked with and I felt were fantastic at what they've done, is they've almost said, well, yes, the results, the numbers on the spreadsheet are there, but actually I'm also taking into consideration the qualitative data. But I'm doing that in my own way. I'm doing it in a way which makes you understand that I'm not ignoring that aspect of what you're doing with the class. I'm logging it in a different way. So it is a very interesting point, but it's one that, like you said, it's when you're building up relationships, it's really important, and I think that needs to be part of the data set of any school. And whether or not there are anyone working in schools that have that, please do write in, or if there's anyone who wants to show me or Natasha something in terms of that one, that'd be great. So so there's another point that we were kind of discussing before the show. Staff relationships shape the school climate more than any policy document ever will. That one, I was thinking about that this morning, and that again, we were talking off air about this one. So what do you reckon at that point then, Natasha? So do you reckon that's an important point, or is there something bit of a grey area in there? Or?
Absolutely. I think relationships between staff are equally important. I think staff who feel supported, which is what we talked about, are better in supporting students because they have that support themselves. They don't have anything, that they need to deal with because they're having that support. I think environments where staff are trusted, where they're valued, where they're able to share concerns openly, because I feel like that's always a big point in schools. You know, some schools are very open to staff being able to speak and say where they feel we can improve. And for me, I feel like that's the only way to improve is to listen to your staff. But there's also places where, you know, it's more corporate, and that's not something that's done. You know, staff don't openly sort of share their views. But we see, where we have been in schools, we see better problem solving because they aren't scared to. Greater consistency in staffing, improved well-being of staff, and reduced burnout, which we know happens in the education sector. And it has reached a peak, you know, in the last few years. I think, you know, statistics are sort of settling now, but it has been at a point where staff burnout has been, you know, large in over the education sector. I think education is emotionally demanding. I think, but I think it deserves a culture of mutual respect and professional trust, so staff can feel confident asking for support where they need to, because healthy relationships within school create stability for students. So one side automatically impacts the other.
Yeah. And I just show this comment as well. I was about to mention this. So one of our comments on YouTube, spot on, the environment is so important. People first. Institutions should put people first.
Yeah.
I had, unfortunately, in my career, I've had that experience of burnout. So when you mentioned that absolutely resonates with me, because, you know, I think in my situation, I just yearned for that humanistic approach where I could go in and say, I want to ask for help, but I don't feel comfortable doing so because I feel like I'm seen as something else, or perhaps I haven't understood the policies properly, or maybe I can't work within this system and it's something to do with me. And it's you know, I like to think of, you know, teaching in general is quite collegiate. You know, it should be collaborative. We should help each other out. We should be in a system where we're all working with the students, and there really shouldn't be any hierarchies, or there shouldn't be any sort of environment which pertains otherwise, because, you know, we're all in it together. We're helping each other out. We're helping students out, and it's that collective thought. If we can get that right in any situation, I think that's where you've got the you've got an amazing, you know, environment. Speaking of that one, do you have an experience about a school or an institution where you worked at that really made a difference to you as in terms of what we're talking about, relationships and systems? What was there any particular situation where you said they got that absolutely spot on, and I'm going to use that model or use parts of it for the rest of my career?
Yeah, I think I have had the privilege of working with lots of schools and going in and out all across sort of London, North London, Hertfordshire, in multiple different sort of ways. And even now in what I do, I work with a huge amount of schools and looking at the changes and things that are coming through. And I think there is no one school that is, you know, the sort of star idea. I think every school tries, or at least wants to be this. You know, I think most places and most head teachers, you know, we would all love to say, this is how we run our school and this is what we do. I think it's the kind of external pressures that come in that change things. But I've seen fantastic work in multiple schools, you know, where relationships is a whole school thing. You know, it's not just the Senko, it's not just the pastoral teams or the heads of year, or, you know, that one family liaison officer, whatever it is, you know, from primary through to secondary. It is where the whole school have the same approach, and it runs through the system. You know, it's part of their ethos and culture. It runs through the veins of the school, that relationships matter. And then these are sort of what we have to do. And I think that comes with, you know, a head teacher who has been and seen and understands the trials and tribulations that work within different classrooms and the children that are there in their setting, and for them to say, here's a little bit of leeway, here's a little bit of trust, and let's all do this together. You know, we've implemented in schools, you know, just very simple sort of spreadsheet structures where everybody is monitoring every child. And if you just see something in a classroom that, you know, you're not happy with, or is a little bit different, or you're not sure about, you know, or they're gazing out the window a bit more than they used to, and that's happening on a regular basis, and everybody's just noting it down, and then having a staff meeting that says, okay, well, hold on, we've noticed that this child's doing this in every lesson, or this child's just doing it in one lesson, or, you know, this child was absolutely fine, and now for the last 2 weeks we've had all these reports. And that's become a whole school approach, and it doesn't have to be as systematic as that, but it does have to be a whole school approach. It's not one person's responsibility. It's not just the teacher's responsibility to create relationships. It's not just the head of year. It's just not the SENCO. It's everybody's to have that same ethos, that same culture running through the school. Yeah.
And someone made a point in the previous TTR show about education or teachers being the fourth emergency service. And in that way, I think there's definitely a truism where we all have that responsibility to look out for our students, and more, I guess, from a teacher's perspective, share that responsibility in terms of, well, you're safeguarding DSL, well, you're deputy head pastoral, so that's your bag. You need to do it. No, because I've worked with some incredible DSLs and pastoral leads, and I've seen how they get absolutely swamped with so much in terms of behavior and the support, and more. It can't be shouldered on one or two people in the school. And if I was my ethos, if there's anything I can do to kind of take that pressure off, and there's anything I can do to really just make sure that my colleagues aren't burdened with this, but also let them know, hey, look, I'm responsible too. This student is in my care. I want to make sure that they are, if there's anything going wrong, I absolutely want to make sure that I can do everything in my power to make it right, you know.
And that helps with that burnout, because everybody's involved then. Everyone's taking a piece of the puzzle to make it work. You know, it's not just on the teacher to make it work in the classroom, because you can draw in that support from your DSL, from your SENCO, from other people who have had that class before, that might have had techniques that they used that worked. And like you said, then it's not a burden on the SENCO or the DSL thinking they've got to take on everything. It's a shared one.
Yeah, absolutely. If you just joined us, welcome to the Sunday Lunch Show with myself, Michael Wright, and Natasha Chalk. We're talking about why relationships matter more than systems. We've had a few comments in, so if there's anyone who wants to comment in, please do send them in on whatever platforms you're listening to. If you're listening to this on Podbean, you can respond back to any of the posts that we put on our social media. Before we go on, we just need to make another shout out to our sponsors. We're going to introduce Hatchet Learning again. This show is brought to you in partnership with Hatchet Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit www.hatchetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles. And another shout out to AQA, who this time going to be promoting their resources. They know that we're the real experts in the classroom. That's why they work closely with teachers like you and myself and Natasha, combining your insights in their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training, and guidance that really do make a difference. They're the UK's most chosen assessment organization. So you already know their work. And as we head into the exam season, AQA are focused on helping teachers feel supported and ready. If you want to find out more about how they're working with teachers, just like us, just head to their website to find out some more. Okay, I want to talk, Natasha, about the students and the parents' perspectives in terms of what makes the relationships powerful and what really helps in that regard. Points that we were just discussing. Belonging is the strongest predicator of engagement. Small relational signals matter. So we were already discussing that about walking through the corridor, just making sure, just checking appearance, body language, having a chat with them. But even just, getting to know the student makes a massive difference in terms of what they do. I guess from a student's perspective, what do you think helps them? What do you think they're looking for? So we're talking a lot about what we think students. So what about students' perspective? What do you reckon they're probably not talking about with their friends, but they're kind of thinking, oh, I want Miss to do this. It's really nice when I've done this. What do you reckon works for them from that perspective?
Yeah, I think acknowledging the child's feelings is a big one. I think empathy, and we were talking before about, you know, when you sometimes we can become immune as well to things. You know, we've been in the industry a long time, you've seen a lot of things, or you've seen the same thing, same behaviors on repeat. You become immune to those situations. It's only natural. It's our way of protecting ourselves, I think. You know, I speak to a lot of social workers, and they feel the same in their role, or carers. And that is a danger. That is a danger that you can't you don't have that empathy anymore. You don't have that sympathy anymore. You know, you've seen it all before, you've done it all before, and you're going through the motions of whatever it is. But actually acknowledging a child's feelings and making them valid is huge. You know, a child that, you know, doesn't want to come to school, or a child that, you know, doesn't want to go to a lesson, or there's, you know, been a relationship breakdown, there is an emotional feeling attached to it. We have it as adults. We use it as protection mechanism, and they're doing exactly the same thing. So I think acknowledging that is huge. I think separating the behavior from identity helps. And that's something we do a lot. You know, there's a lot about unconscious bias as a teacher. And nobody does these things out of malice. This is not, you know, a horrible thing that we do as teachers. Sometimes it is unconscious. You know, we don't realize we're doing it, or, you know, again, we've seen it so many times, or we've heard it all before. And that just becomes how we are. But we do have to be careful that we are separating behavior from identity, and allowing time before discussion is one of the things I always comment with teachers. You know, it's so easy for something to happen and you say, right, I'm going to go and speak to that child. You know, I'm going to take them outside to talk to them. But actually, if you were angry, if you had just blown your top at somebody, would you want to talk to them immediately? No, or do you need a little bit of a break? Do you need just a bit of time before you have that discussion? And again, it's not, you know, done out of negativity, or, you know, we do it because that's the system. That's what we do. You know, we want to make up, we want to lay things right. We want that child to then go back in the classroom. But actually, sometimes there needs to be a little bit of decision time. And I think children need that. Children are allowed to have that time as well. And I think us as adults, we have to model calm communication. You know, they always say, you know, there's a phrase for teachers, leave your baggage at the door when you come in, or, you know, the head teacher's mood in the morning. I get this a lot. Your head teacher's mood in the morning is the school's mood for the rest of the day. And there are all those sayings, but there is some truth in it. You know, we do have to model that calm communication so that they can model that, you know, absorb that calm communication and kind of have that back. And mistakes don't end relationships. And children need to understand that. You know, you make a mistake, we're not going to give up. We're not going to not talk to you again. We're not going to have you back in our classroom again. Mistakes don't end relationships. We learn together how to rectify them, how to make sure we don't do them again. And I think young people benefit from seeing adults, you know, model accountability in those ways, empathy and resilience, like we've said. And I think it repairs relationships, and then relationships can withstand a little bit more difficulty if a child thinks, you know, you're in it, and all these things that you're going to do are not going to destroy a relationship. Mistakes don't end relationships. Is that it? That's wonderful. I love that. Yeah. That's a really powerful thing you said there, Natasha, because that in anyone's minds, you know, if they're doing something wrong, if we're referring to the system, if they're working out of the system, they're doing something that the system doesn't want them to do. Yeah. And if we have it in our minds that we work in the system, we must fit in the system, we must fit with policy. Yeah. The minute we make a mistake, the minute we step out of line, from a student's perspective, the minute they make a mistake in the classroom, they might be thinking in their minds, oh, that's it, detention, exclusion, Miss or Sir will hate me. Yeah. And it's that modeling of, hey, we're human, we make mistakes, we can see you're trying. And I always say to my students, certainly students who I send, I've got one lad, he's brilliant, he's like me, ADHD, but he's got a different type of one. So my head just goes, to la la land occasionally. His is just, he just can't stop moving. And it's great when I talk to him, because I kind of relate to him from that perspective. Say, look, I'm an older, dude here with ADHD. I was like you in your position.
I always tell him from that perspective when he feels like he's messed up, and you can see in his face when I'm talking or the teacher's talking, I'm just kind of doing some team teaching, and he kind of gets reprimanded. You just see in his face like he just has that, I've done it again.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
look at the point, I've done it again. So I automatically, when I come in, I say, right, come here. And I always remind him, I said, look, you can't help this. This isn't what you think it is. Honestly, we see that you're trying. So, you keep carrying on, you're going to get all the support from us. And, he needs that constant reminder, and I'm happy to give that constant reminder. So I love that mistakes don't end relationships, because they don't really, do they?
No, they can't. They
Yeah.
can't. Otherwise, no one will be talking to anyone.
Yeah, but
We all make mistakes. We're all human.
school's closed. Why?
Yeah.
There's about 400
Too
of
many
you.
mistakes.
Just going to shut the school now. That's it. We're done. We've got a question here from LinkedIn. What are the blockers that stop change in terms of culture? So if we're talking about supporting students and developing that culture, obviously we've just mentioned when mistakes don't end relationship, which is great. Is there any other blockers that you've seen that kind of put a stop to that one?
I think if we circle back, there is a lot of pressure on schools. There's a lot of pressure on leadership. There's a lot of pressure on head teachers. I can speak from experience. That there's multiple facets going on all the time. There really is. There's the finance side that's going on. There's the business side of schools that's going on. There's the grades that are going on. There's the Ofsted that's coming in. There's the what you want, and in terms of output, you're now schools are as businesses as much as they are schools, and that's the truth. And so there is multiple things that go on, and I think it's juggling all those balls and keeping those all afloat, and trying underneath to make sure that all these things are happening and going on. And that's not just from the head or the leadership team. Like I said, it has to span down, but everybody has to have that same ethos and culture, and everybody has to have that push. And it goes back to people not being scared to say, oh, hold on, I don't think we're doing the pastoral side as well here, or, this policy or this system is really, really stringent. Is there any way that we can move on this? I think it happens kind of all the way down the chain that people have to be involved. I don't think there's particular blockers necessarily, other than all the other things that have to come into being part of being in a school system.
Yeah. Well said. It's schools are complex. They are incredibly complex organizations. You're dealing with, we'll get onto parents in terms of the communication, but you're dealing with parents, you're dealing with staff, you're dealing with students, you're dealing with outside agencies, you're dealing with inspectors, you're dealing with leadership, you're dealing with the local community, you're dealing with local press, national press. There's so many factors that go into a school that we'll walk around and we just have them buzzing around our head. And it's so important to understand that, and it's you've obviously operated on the leadership side, so you looking at it from the top down, aren't you? So, and you've obviously worked up to that one, so you can see it from that perspective. Going, my word, there's so many movable parts here that we just need to make sure that we've got a good grounding on it. But I think that leading with empathy and leading with that humanistic approach will absolutely maintain culture, because people create culture. The culture is created by how people interpret how safe they feel in an environment. So I think the best thing to do is just to kind of lead on that approach there. So in terms of parents, then, what kind of communication makes parents trust and better connect with what
I think communication is the biggest thing with parents. Consistent communication with parents. Not just when something's happened, we're going to call you. It's, and that goes back to the other side of it. Suddenly, as soon as you see those little changes in a student, as soon as we all have those groups of children, and there's always one child on the periphery edge of the group that sort of, sometimes is accepted in and allows them to play, sometimes doesn't. We can spot the signs of where things may well happen if the whole school are working together collegiately on these things. And so it's those kind of calls that start off, they show a little bit of care and compassion. We've just noticed that so and so is just on the edge of her friendship group, and I just want to make sure everything's okay. Maybe you could check in tonight and make sure everything's okay as well. Those kind of calls. I always say to Senkos, and again, I know I'm talking about time, but I always say to Senkos, have you ever just taken the list of children that you have within EHCP or the children that are on your list and just called home just to check in at random, one a day over a 3-week period? Or have you ever just done that just to say, is everything okay? Because sometimes you find out things that you don't know are happening, because children mask beautifully. Lots of children mask beautifully what's going on either at home or at school. So, you're not at home and you get, how was school? Fine. How was your lesson today? Good. That's it. Nothing else. And you take that as fine and good. But there's no in-depth conversation there, because that's just how that child doesn't, that's just their personality or their nature. And on the other side, you get lots of children in school who get good grades, do really, really well, everything's fine, and then go home and have an outburst every night, or are crying at home because they've masked all day and then they can't do any more at home. So picking up on those sorts of children as well. But that is, again, building that relationship with parents helps that. If you suddenly just put a call in and the mum said, actually, last night she was totally distraught because this is what happened. Suddenly you're more informed as a school. Yeah. Suddenly you've got more information to work with and more techniques to give your staff to move forward with that particular child in the classroom. And I think, curiosity about that, about their behavior, about those assumptions, and that collaboration, not just between parents as well, but professionals. Parents are very scared of professionals. They're not as scared of schools as they are of professionals. The mention of social worker, or speaking to social care, instinctively parents say, no, I'm not taking my child away from me. Like that's not what social care do. There's a long road before a child is ever taken away from their parents or carers. But there's multiple facets of help that they can give. Huge amounts, calling early help in, having a social worker, getting another team involved. A lot of that goes through the social care channels. Children having mentors. A lot of the children we work with that have mentors come via the social care channels to help with different things. But it's having that relationship with parents where you're not scared to say those things, and they trust you and believe you that you're not leading them down a road of someone who's going to take their child away from them.
That's fascinating. That is fascinating. I hadn't considered the fear factor of professionals. In terms of is it? I guess it's more to do with the power of what they could do.
Yeah.
So if social services are being called in, a parent's instant reaction is, oh my goodness, they're going to, and that is because they have the power to. And it's about. So from what I'm hearing is about schools themselves being clear and having clarity in terms of what they're saying they're doing, but also just having a reassurance of, well, this is the process, and this is perhaps where the system can work in favor, because if you've got a strong, solid system with really good relational aspects, you can say, well, actually, this is what we will do to help you, and this is how the system can actually help you in this instance. But rest assured, X, Y, and Z. I think it's really, really powerful in terms of supporting parents, and that is really, really interesting to hear that. I hadn't considered that, in terms of they're being scared. Again, we're talking about a bubble, right? Because we work in that bubble, and the message of the mere mention of social services, we're putting our professional caps on. We're thinking, oh yes, with this X, Y, and Z. Yeah. I hadn't considered actually. No. That could mean something completely,
And that goes for language as well. We have to be really careful. I do it myself. I'll say, oh, EBSA, and someone's like, I'm really sorry. What is that? I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. It's emotional based school avoidance. But that goes for that too. Language used is huge for parents because they're not in the bubble.
Yeah.
You know, they don't know our acronyms or what we're saying or why we're doing it or how we're doing it. So it's important that we use that plain language that everybody's able to understand. Because sometimes that can lead to miscommunication or, you know, different interpretations of what it is. And that's not maybe what you meant at all, or the parent has seen it as something, you know, to be scared of. But actually, it's just because we've used jargon that we use in the bubble that they don't understand outside of it.
Yeah, it's happened to me. I've been called out on that when I mention an acronym. It's like, what's that? I'm like, oh, sorry, it means this, you know. And we have a little chuckle in that way, because like I said, you're in that bubble and things happen very quickly, so you kind of shorten things. For the last part of this chat, I wanted to focus on, from a teacher's perspective, about working in systems. I wanted to start first with working in broken systems and the impact that it has on staff. But I also wanted to end on what can one do to repair those systems, and what can one do to turn that around and kind of almost go from red flag to green flag in terms of, you know, working with the system. So from my perspective, you know, when you're working within either a rigid system or a system that's too loose and too broad, if you're working in a system which, as we mentioned before, prioritizes the system over everything else, or if you're working in a system where you're fearful for asking for help, you might be perceived as whatever it is. I mean, from that perspective, what can teachers control if they happen to be working in the system which they feel isn't working for them and they're struggling? What could teachers do just in like the short term, just to make sure that they have some kind of grounding of a psychological safety?
Yeah, I think there has to be a break in the chain somewhere. And if you're the catalyst for that because you feel passionately enough about something, I think it is being brave enough to say. And I think it matters how as well. You know, I think it matters how. If you're coming from a professional perspective and you're laying on the table, you know, how you feel and why you think the system isn't working, that's much more digestible for somebody further up, for leadership, for governors to sort of understand. I think where it becomes sort of an unhealthy culture, you know, which can happen in those schools, because if you don't feel like you can speak out or you don't feel like you can say anything, then you end up in sort of unhealthy cultures where, you know, the language used about students or the language used between staff feeds that unhealthy culture. Whereas I think actually what we want is to prove a healthy culture where adults speak respectfully about it and respectfully about the changes that they want to happen. And, you know, sparking other people's curiosity with what you're saying. You know, I feel like this doesn't work. You know, what do you think? And coming with maybe a possible solution as well. You know, I always say that to staff when I speak to them. I want you to bring all of your problems to me, but I also want you to come with a possible solution. Because if you come and you don't have a solution, it may well be something I've already thought about and I don't have the solution either. So actually we need to look at it in a broad fashion, because as head teachers, we don't always share everything. We can't. We sit in our office and, you know, we mull over multiple things in there. And, you know, sometimes staff think, oh, well, you know, she doesn't know, she doesn't understand, or, you know, she doesn't see it. We do. It's just that we have to prioritize, and sometimes we don't have the answers. I don't. My leadership team is sick to death of me. I always say, can you read this email for me? What do you think about this? I'm going to bring another thing to the table. And they're like, oh, Tam, stop. But I don't have all the answers, and I definitely can't do everything by myself. That's the whole point of having a team around you. But I think if you're going to bring something in, bring it in. Bring it with a positive attitude. Bring it with a possible solution and say, this is how I feel about it. This is what I think we could do. Or come in and say, look, I don't know what we can do about it. I have no idea what the solution is, but here, you know, see this, see my thoughts, see what I'm thinking, and collaborate, you know, collaborate with others.
You know what? I think you've probably hit a really important point in terms of the us and them. And when you're working in the system and it's not working for you, it's very easy to divide and conquer, and it's very easy to create that narrative in one's head.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's imagined or whether or not it actually happens,
Of course.
there is a divide. Since I've started working in middle leadership as I'm kind of moving up, I've kind of almost getting closer to the thoughts and the mindset of senior leaders. And as I kind of, sit around the table, so to speak, and we're talking about calendar planning and et cetera,
Yeah.
I really get a greater sense that when you mention that, actually, do you know what, leaders, it's not always top down. The leaders sometimes actually just need their staff as well to go in and go, hey, look, can you understand me on this one as well?
Yeah.
And I think depending on the situations and obviously the culture and whatnot, I think what I've learned from my time in teaching is to have a greater empathy towards leaders, because, like I said, you're dealing with everything, and you're dealing with everything at a position which has far more responsibility, than I. But certainly looking at it from that collaborative perspective. So bringing something in, saying, do you know what, I don't have the answers. Maybe you have something, and then you can go in and say yes. Or, someone comes in there is an issue. Here's the issue. However, I'm not going to be a negative Nelly about it. I'm going to go in and say, look, I've got this proposal. I've been thinking about it. It might work. Could you mull it over? Could you consider it? And if there's anything that could be taken from it, that would be absolutely amazing. I know, obviously, easier said than done, certainly in stress points of the year when everyone is, there's a point, certainly now with exams, where everyone's going to be on edge. But I think it's so important to understand, and you mentioned it too, is that, or alluded to, is that, in many ways, not everyone is out to get people.
No.
It may seem that way. Like you said, Natasha's always in her office. She's never coming out. Well, have you knocked on the office and asked? Have you knocked in and said, hey, how's it going? Do you understand? Do you know why they're probably not in the office? So there's a lot of that I think teachers can look at and do that.
And that's what I mean about healthy relationships. It has to be a healthy place. The minute you think there's an us and them culture is the minute things aren't particularly working well. Everybody has to be collaborative. I mean, we've just done a staff panel, which is something I've spoken to other head teachers about having, is a staff panel. So, and my staff panel is a mix of everybody from different levels, and admins in there, and, IT's in there. And so that when I have ideas, it's not just my leadership team I can share them with. I share them with the staff panel, and then I get lots of different perspectives of, this would never work. And I go, okay, tell me why, or actually, this is a really great idea, but what about if we did it like this? It would be easier for teachers or our mentors or our, and I'm like, okay, that's great. You have to all be in it together. We just keep going back around to ethos and culture, of the school setting. And it all goes back around to the same thing. Everybody has to be in it. Everybody has to want the same thing. And that doesn't happen. You will have staff members, especially with change. Nobody likes change. Everybody hates change. A new head comes in, or we change a system. Some people are going to go along. Some people are going to go, why? We've been doing it like this for 10 years and it's been great. Well, it's because we're trying to move with the times, because we have to move forward, because something wasn't right and we have to do it. But tell me why you don't want that change. Tell me what about it you think is going to make a difference, or why the old way was a good way. Everybody has to be in it together to make the right changes.
So what about if, say, for example, a decision's been made from leadership and the person who, so the decision's been made and the teacher or the person in's going, no, that's never going to work. But the response is, well, let's just see anyway.
Yeah.
It happens. It completely falls apart. And then the teacher goes, well, see, I told you it wouldn't work. How about in those situations where maybe staff working perhaps under you saying, look, well, with the greatest of respect, this just not going to work. From your perspective, are you willing to kind of pump the brakes on it, or are you willing to go, well, actually, I thought about this, and there's a lot of things that you don't know.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do it this way. We're financial restraints or anything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's difficult because exactly what you just said. Sometimes there's months of work that's gone into something, You know, and we've looked at data, and we've spoken to people, and we've looked at things, or, you know, our commissioners or our governors or someone is saying there is a gap here and I need you to fix it. And so sometimes that is, you know, sometimes I can't wait for opinions. I have to make a quick decision. You know, we had a similar situation in September. We were told that SEND funding was going to be cut by 50%, which is a huge amount. And that was, you know, 4 days before the start of the term. It was the 28th of August, and we had to make a decision by the 4th of December. I had to make very quick, very impactful changes. There was no coming away from it. Things have settled, and now maybe some of those changes, you know, weren't the best way forward. Actually, maybe some of those we're going to look to move back towards. But sometimes you have to be reactive. There's just no getting away with it. And, you know, where we can sort of have those conversations and bring staff in and make sure it's collaborative moving forward, that's the best way to do it. But where we do have to make very quick, impactful changes or decisions that are, you know, financial or sustainable, then yes, sometimes it has to be done. And you're right, they're not always the best changes. They're not always, you know, going to work, and there will be staff out there saying, I told you so. But it's because, you know, it's something that either has to be done rapidly, or it's something that's been months in the making with multiple other people in, you know, commissioners, governors, that sort of thing. And so actually we are going to give it a shot. And yes, we might fall flat on our face and we'll accept that at that point. But yeah, it's hard.
But that's it. That shows humility from your point of perspective. So you're not just shooting from the hip and saying we're going to do this. No. It has to be it's reactive, but it has to be done with all of the expertise in mind to go, right, if we're going to make this work, we have to do it like this. But you've already indicated that you regrettably have to do it this way. Things are more stabilized, so I'm sure you've acknowledged that, but also you've mentioned that, hey, you know what, maybe with our decision, because if we had, you know, 2020, we saw it all, we would have done it differently. Now that we've got that perspective, we can actually revert back to a few of those things. But it just reminds me of that working, because it seems like the system works, the relationships have already been built. So when you're making those tough decisions in a system, when your relationships aren't built or not in a positive, those decisions would be felt more keenly, and there'll be a lot more issues. But because you spent time building the relationships, those knocks, you know, those hits, so to speak, they're not going to hit as hard, because people are going to be willing to go, oh well, you tried your best and you're doing your best, and you know what, let's see if we can make it work. And we can always review afterwards. And I think that's the perfect way I think any school should operate. I've certainly had experience where it's been the opposite of that, where it feels like a decision has been made, hasn't really been thought through. There wasn't any other decisions in terms of, there weren't any other factors like financial or timetable. It was just a case of doing this, and I felt it was never going to work, and it was always going to be very problematic, and it proved from my perspective to be problematic, even though I tried really hard to it. We reverted back to the original thing, which was great, but I think the long-term effects from my point of view is that, well gosh, that decision wasn't, it felt like the decision wasn't necessarily made with the best of intentions. So, you know, I don't know.
And we were talking about this earlier, is we're not all perfect. We're not. You know, we only go with what we see, what we know, what data we have, what we do. You know, we're not perfect. No one's perfect. And actually, no school should ever think they're perfect, because you can always be 1% better. And that is, you know, the ethos is, we'll have a look. Are we doing it all right? Yeah, we're doing all right. But can we be 1% better than what we are now? Because at the end of the day, whatever we do impacts our children. And our children are the next generation of people, of adults. You know, they're the next round of workers that are going into you know, careers. So nobody's perfect. I believe everybody does try to do their best. But that's where multiple heads are better than one. That's where multiple people talking about something and collaborating are better. And whether that's you know, staff and parents, or staff and students, or students and parents, or internally staff, communication and collaboration just feeds everything.
Yeah. So let's end on a positive then. From your experience, what can we do, like to mend if the system for you isn't working? What can we do in a positive way to make positive change? What can we do to ensure that even though the system isn't working for you, you yourself can still maintain those relationships with staff, with students? What can you do to make sure that the core of who we are when we're going to work, we're maintaining that these are my morals and ethics, and I'm going to make sure we build on this? What can we do to kind of improve that?
So education is ultimately about people, isn't it? We were saying this earlier, otherwise AI would do our jobs, but it can't because it doesn't have the humanity behind it. So systems are necessary and they provide important structure, but relationships determined what our children feel and what they feel that they're able to access the opportunities those systems provide. For many young people, one positive, consistent relationship can be the turning point that enables them to re-engage with education and learning, or rebuild a confidence that they might have lost, or begin to see a future that isn't possible. And if we want better outcomes, we have to prioritize that connection alongside curriculum. I'm not saying to take away any systems or processes, but alongside it, we need to prioritize that connection. Because when relationships are strong, so is progress. So I think, there's bits that we can do as teachers in the classroom. There's bits that we can do as leaders of a faculty, of a curriculum area. There's bits we can do as senior leaders. There's bits we can do as a pastoral team, as a Senko, as a DSL. And even if we all just did our own bits, it would already create a culture and an ethos that, the school haven't given you. So think about what you can do in your own part. And then that helps build what the bigger, wider picture needs to look like. And then you've got multiple people already starting a system that needs to be there.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's a wonderful way to end the show. Natasha, thank you ever so much for joining me for the Sunday show. Thank you for everyone who's sent in comments. There has been a few that I've shown. There's a few more that I haven't, but thank you for responding. Do keep in touch with us. When we post it on Teachers Talk Radio, keep in touch, keep this conversation going, because it's clearly meant a lot to the viewers, and I think there's a lot of people, Natasha, that really resonated with what you've said today. So thank you ever so much. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you have a lovely, I guess we're on Easter break now. Well, I've got one more week left, but for the rest of you who are lucky enough to be on Easter break, have a wonderful next couple of weeks. Don't open that laptop. Go as far away as possible from work. Go and enjoy Easter. Enjoy the time of your friends and family. But we'll see you in a couple of weeks with another Teachers Talk Radio show. So until that time, thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you soon, and thank you again, Natasha.
Thanks.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.